came home late after a party that got out of hand. When I woke up, my husband wasn't next to me. Hello, Reddit. My name is Nicole, and I am 45 years old. I'm a school teacher, but I might be losing my job soon. That is yet to be decided, seeing as I'm still on probation at the moment. That is not even the problem here. I have a major and bigger problem than that. My husband has left me. I came home later after a party that got out of hand. When I woke up, my husband wasn't next to me. At first, I thought he had left early for work, but he wouldn't come back that evening or the next day, which had been a Sunday. I tried several times to reach out to him, but he wouldn't pick up my calls or return them. I panicked and had even tried reporting him as missing until he had decided to come home after a week. And when he came around, he had told me he wanted a divorce. Shocked was an understatement of how I felt that day. And when I had asked why, that must have been my mistake because John had turned to me and just flung a picture at me. It had turned out to be a picture of Elliot and me entering the hotel room together. That had not been all. Elliot had his hand on my bottom, and I was smiling up at him. And that picture must have been taken on the day of the party I had with my friends. We had had a reunion, and we were all feeling too bold and audacious, especially after discussing what we used to be like when we were younger, and we had a few dares. Mine had been to have a one-night stand with a stranger, and that had happened to be Elliot. Elliot actually wasn't a stranger to me. I knew him very well. In fact, I knew him quite too well. Elliot was my best friend Maggie's son, and he was also my godson. But my friends didn't know that, as Maggie and I had attended different universities, so she had been quite far away, and we only ever saw each other during summer when we went home. Maggie and I grew up together as next-door neighbors, and we've been friends ever since. I was 2 years older than Maggie, and despite that, we were very close and almost inseparable right from the day her parents moved into our town. We went to the same high school, and we did literally everything together. Although Maggie and I were quite close, we had a whole lot of differences. Maggie was reserved and barely spoke to people except me, and she was always interested in books, both the ones that were definitely for us as teens and the ones that weren't. Most times I had to drag her out of bed where she would lay for hours just reading. It wasn't surprising when she had decided to study accounting, because I knew how much she loved math and solving problems. No. It had been shocking when Maggie had announced she was getting married. As far as I knew, I did not know any guy around her, and she never told me anything about dating any man until she had announced her marriage. I tried to convince her otherwise, because I had felt we were too young to be getting married, and we were still in university back then, but Maggie had been adamant and had said she knew what she wanted. I left her alone when I couldn't convince her otherwise. Maggie had gotten divorced after 6 years of marriage with her 4-year-old son, Elliot, who was my godson automatically. While Maggie was busy being a married woman, I was busy with school activities. I don't mean the normal studying because I hated studying. I mean I was busy having friends and partying all the way. And my group of friends that we moved around with were literally the baddest girls in school. They, or should I say we were known for our craziness all around school. You could never find me in class except it was my favorite course, and even then I could spend 30 minutes, and I'm out already. But you could always find me at parties. There were no parties or clubs around that didn't have me as their regular. In fact, most parties weren't lively until I came around with my friends. I enjoyed my lifestyle until I almost couldn't graduate because I spent very little attention on my studies, and I knew how disappointed my parents would be. They had already been disappointed that I chose to become a school teacher, and they always made the reference of Maggie, so not graduating when I ought to would definitely have them on my case again. So I had gone to meet Daniel, the nerd in the class, to help me with my courses. I had even been willing to pay. But talking to him for a few seconds, I realized that Daniel probably had a crush on me because of the way he blushed and stammered, and I found it cute. I would give him my assignments to do, and whenever he made some possible questions for exams, I got them and would read them for exams instead of reading my books. And I passed really well. I guess Daniel must have thought we were dating, especially because he started acting clingy, asking where I was, who I was with, and what type of friends I should have. I bore it because I wanted to graduate normally, but once we were out, I cut him off totally. Yes, I may have taken advantage of the whole situation a little bit, but Daniel took it too far. After graduating, I first spent the year living with my 4 other friends. I had that idea that I still wanted to enjoy life first, before anything else. 2 of them had issues with their results, so they couldn't graduate, so we all rented an apartment and stayed together. We continued our lifestyles, and we had almost gotten in trouble once when the police invaded a party that wasn't supposed to be happening and that we had no business being at. I went home after that time, and coincidentally, Maggie had been around then with her barely 6-month-old baby boy. The way everyone ignored me and just stuck with her and her baby and their comfort alone made me so jealous. I somehow wished I was the one receiving all that attention. In fact, after being home, I avoided her for a while. I felt like her life was so perfect and that she didn't need to even do anything before people loved her. After avoiding her for a week, I decided to leave and just get something done with my life. I stayed away from my friends because I knew being with them was not exactly helping me in any way. I started this job as a kindergarten teacher because there was no other place around there to hire. But I had regretted it because I realized I had no patience for children the way I thought I would. It wasn't long before I got fired for misconduct. Mind you, I didn't hit the kids. I just kind of yelled at them whenever they got messy. I got a job as a part-timer in a mall so as to pay my bills because I couldn't still get a job as a school teacher. It was there I met Peter. Peter had been a regular customer, and he always happened to Target whenever it was my turn to watch the shop before coming around to get anything. He would smile at me and make small, meaningless conversations with me, but I paid attention to them. Why? Because Peter was very handsome, and he was a lawyer who worked at the law firm right beside the mall where I worked. I felt maybe if I got involved and eventually married Peter, I would feel less envy for my friend, who I barely returned her calls. Soon, Peter asked me on a date on my off day, and I gladly agreed to it. Turns out Peter wasn't as much fun as I peaked him to be. He was rather boring, and I had to be the one who made most of the conversation by rambling about anything and everything. But I was willing to bear with that, so far. It got me a partner good enough to pay bills and also father our kids. Peter and I started dating, but it was just horrible. Peter was not only boring during conversations, but he was also boring in bed. I have had a lot of sex with other guys back in university, and somehow most of them knew how to bring pleasure. But you'd think Peter was about to have holy sex whenever we did have sex, which is usually initiated by me. I even taught him how to please me, but Peter still wouldn't get it, and it frustrated me both mentally and sexually. I eventually ended things with him, and shockingly, within a few months, Peter got married. It pained me a whole lot because I felt I could have been the one wearing the wedding band if I hadn't ended things with him. And I swore that the next reasonable man that came to me, no matter how boring, I would pay attention and even endure the sexual aspect if I had to. I met John when I was 30 years of age and still upset about my whole situation. By then, I had started teaching at a high school close to my apartment, and instead of feeling fulfilled, I felt nothing. I was still an unmarried lady, and it usually just got to me, especially when I had to hear Maggie talk on and on about her marriage and her ex-husband. She even started dating someone new despite having a kid, and I, who doesn't have any baggage, had no man looking my way. The school where I worked decided to take the kids on a set tour to a museum, and I and another teacher had been selected to take them. We had gone there, and since I knew nothing about art, I left it to their art teacher, who had been the other teacher who came along, and I just minded my own business while keeping an eye on the kids. I stood in front of one of the paintings and just stared at it, but not really at it because I was lost in thought. I was so lost in thought I almost jumped when a man whispered, "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" When I turned, the man was instead a beautiful piece of art, and I had agreed, nodding my head. But I'm sure he knew that we were talking about different things. He laughed and then proceeded to tell me about the painting I was standing in front of. I wasn't interested in the painting, obviously. I was more interested in the man, and when he had introduced himself as John, I had quickly suggested meeting again to discuss another painting. He laughed and agreed to my terminology. We met again and again and again. John was just so much fun, and I was madly in love with him after just barely a month of knowing each other. We dated for only 4 months before we decided to get married. I had excitedly called Maggie to inform her and had asked her to be my maid of honor. My other 3 friends couldn't come to my wedding, as I lost contact with 2 of them, while the other one was actually halfway across the world, and she couldn't find time to come. I hadn't even been upset because I was scared of them coming anyway. I had painted this perfect, gentle lady picture to John, and I didn't want them to slip and tell him all about my wild past. After John and I got married, we started trying for a child, but all to no avail. I couldn't get pregnant no matter how hard I tried. I tried herbal medicine and even hospitals, but nothing was working. It frustrated me, and I kept wishing I had a baby. John eventually stopped trying altogether, saying it was putting me under too much stress just thinking about a child. He had told me that if a child would come, it would come and that we shouldn't force it. I understood deep within me that he said that for my benefit, so I would stop worrying about him going to impregnate another woman, but it made me upset, and I refused to speak to him for some days. I went from one fertility clinic to another and still got the same results. I even tried IVF, but it failed, so eventually I gave up. After about 5 whole years of trying for a baby and not getting any positive results, I stopped trying altogether, and I started to focus on enjoying life. John and I were in love, and it continued like that for many years, although not having a child still hurt, especially when we went to gatherings together, and the issue of children popped up, and I had nothing to say. Most times, I avoided going home so I didn't get to see Maggie, and when she had called me one time to ask where I live so she could come hang out with me, I had cut her off for a short while. Not because I didn't love Maggie, but I envied her life too much, and seeing her would be like remembering that I was not totally happy. Eventually, Maggie stopped trying to contact me. It was painful, but it had been for the best because I couldn't exactly stand the pain of her talking nonstop about her child and boyfriend. John and I, like I said, were the perfect couple even without kids, but the perfection became imperfect when I thought I saw my husband with a woman, and she was carrying a baby in her hand. I had angrily stalked them and had dragged the woman by her hair, calling her all sorts of names before I had realized it hadn't even been my husband standing there, but the woman's. And the woman had lost some hair, trying to hold on to her baby, and also remove my hand from her hair, while the husband was trying to remove me. I felt ashamed of myself, and I had to pay a settlement just to not escalate the issue. If I haven't mentioned before, John was a policeman, and it would be unruly seeing that his wife was brought to the station fighting for a man that wasn't even her husband in the first place. But John had eventually found out, and he had been upset. I thought he was capable of cheating, but I didn't mind all that because I still felt a little uneasy about John meeting another woman. I started to monitor his movements, especially when I wasn't working, like a mad woman. If I saw him with another woman, I just flipped and would react as a result of my insecurities. I met Elliot again for the first time since he was a baby when he was 22. He was so grown and big, and I didn't even know he was the one because he hadn't even introduced himself properly to me. School had been on break that time, and I had gone to the cafe I usually go to get my regular and usual cup of coffee because they made it exactly the way I liked it. I had been trying to pay for the coffee when my card started having issues, and I realized too late that I had bought the wrong card. I didn't have my phone with me, and I had no cash, and I had taken the coffee already, which meant I had to pay. I was still thinking of a way to avoid the embarrassing situation when Elliot had come to my rescue. He had offered to pay for my coffee. I had been so relieved and happy and had thanked him profusely, and he had asked that I stay for another cup of coffee and that he was buying if I wanted to say thank you properly. I had been surprised at the request because it was physically obvious that I was even much older than he was, and I couldn't trust the request he made. But then again, I wasn't in any position to reject the offer, seeing that I didn't want to be indebted or anything. He had ordered a cup of coffee for himself, and I had placed another order for my type of coffee. He paid, and we went to sit at one of the mini tables in the cafe. Elliot introduced himself as Elliot, and when I had stylishly asked about his job, he evaded the question and just somehow kept me talking nonstop about myself. He was so easy to talk to, and the way he winked and teased me with his eyes just had me captivated. And before I realized it, I had been on my third cup of coffee, and it was noon already. I excused myself immediately, and Elliot had insisted on having my contact, so I gave him an excuse in my head that it had been because I was grateful, not for anything else. Elliot started texting me every day. Sometimes he would call, and we would speak for hours about everything and anything. I knew, obviously from past experiences, that Elliot was very much interested in me, but he was too young for me, and then again, I was married. And John had never given me the impression that he loved someone else, even though I kept trying to make it like that with my jealous habits. But after meeting Elliot, I even stopped stalking John, and he was quite happy thinking that I now fully trusted his commitment and love to him, and it made me feel slightly guilty. But then, I had shrugged it off because I hadn't even been cheating. I merely just enjoyed a good conversation with someone younger. Strange how I thought that from the beginning, and still yet, I never told John about Elliot before he met him as Maggie's son. Elliot and I even started spending time together. We would go for lunch together, or sometimes it was just a picnic outing. Other times it was dinner at some fancy restaurant whenever John was out of town for work. I knew I was getting a little too attached to Elliot, but I enjoyed the attention so much, I just didn't want it to stop. To know that I still felt sexy to a mid-20s guy made me very much happy. But that happiness had been cut short when I had bumped into Maggie at the mall while trying to shop for groceries. She had been so excited to see me, and truly, I had been too. Well, that was until she told me she had come to see her son, and they had decided to go grocery shopping. Excited to see my godson, whom I sent a birthday present to every year, I had been so shocked when I had seen Elliot calling out for his mom, Maggie. Maggie, clueless about the whole situation, had introduced me to her son, and Elliot had grinned and had asked me if I wanted to be addressed as Aunt Nicole or just Nicole. Visibly shaken, I had opted out for Nicole because the aunt part would make me feel more guilt than I already have. Maggie wanted us to catch up, and she had invited me to come with her to the spa the next day, and I didn't have any choice but to agree, seeing that this wasn't an on-call suggestion that I could easily refuse and lie about an emergency. That whole day, I was very unhappy, and I had texted Elliot to ask if he knew all along who I was. He had replied and said he knew, but had become curious about me, and knew that if I knew exactly who he was, we would never be able to relate as much as we had. In my head, I decided that I was going to cut off everything that had to do with Elliot. It was barbaric to think that I would have anything aside from friendship or an auntish relationship with my godson and best friend's son. I went out with Maggie all through her stay, and when she eventually left, I started avoiding Elliot. It hadn't been as easy as I thought it would be because Elliot kept conjuring excuses and reasons for us to see. One time, it had been his mother who had wanted to say hi to both of us on a video call to see whether we were getting along real fine. Another time, it had been because his mother had asked him to drop off some presents for me, and when I had called Maggie to thank her, she had been surprised because she never sent me anything, and I had to lie and say it was probably from my distant cousin whom we just reconnected. I don't even have any distant cousin at all. I knew I had to get Elliot off my back, but I guess I wasn't trying too hard, thinking back now. I mean, I would know that he was lying with his mother again, and I would still give him the needed attention. It wasn't long after that the first mistake had happened. Elliot had called me and told me he was really sick, and he had no one to call to come attend to him. Worried, I had rushed over to his place only to meet him in a perfectly healthy situation with some snacks on his table, and a movie paused. He had pleaded that he only wanted to watch a movie with me and knew I wouldn't come if he hadn't called me like that. I eventually allowed him to persuade me to watch the movie, and crazily, the movie was about a young lover and an older woman. The difference was that the older woman in the movie wasn't married, and I was. I knew the message Elliot was trying to pass across with the movie, and I had tried to leave halfway through the movie. Believe me, I tried to, but Elliot had anticipated my next move as he quickly dragged me to himself and kissed me. The mistake I made is that I didn't push him away. I merely went along with it. We had sex right there on his couch with the movie playing in the background, and probably because he was younger and probably had lots of experience, he was very good at pleasing me. Once would be a mistake, but a second repetition and a third one and more probably isn't, right? Elliot was quite addicting. He was fresh, the new toy I had to play with. And the fact that he was even younger, and also my best friend's son, made it all more alluring and erotic for me. I was like a child playing a very dangerous game. Elliot made me feel way younger, and it excited me very much. So much that I had refused a trip with John, which I usually always looked forward to every year because we got to spend uninterrupted time together. John had been surprised, and I had to lie about schoolwork that I had to finish up during the holidays to teach the kids. It had been a lame excuse, but John didn't say anything about it again. Elliot and I continued our affair, and I knew that Elliot was attached too much, but I was enjoying the attention a little too much to really care. One time, Maggie had come to visit again, and she had insisted I invite her over to my place so she could finally meet John. She had come with Elliot, and I had been hypersensitive, so I didn't say the wrong thing, especially in front of my husband and best friend. But Elliot didn't even bother to hide his admiration for me, and it just put me on edge through dinner until they finally left. While John and I were lying in bed that night preparing to sleep, John had stated his observations about Elliot's lost puppy looks at me throughout dinner, and I had quickly dismissed it as admiration for someone who had always never missed his birthdays and sending presents. I had told John I was like Elliot's aunt and that he was young, and John had kept quiet about it after that. Elliot and I still did not stop seeing each other, but then Elliot started to act really possessive, especially whenever I was with him, and John called. One time I had excused myself to use the bathroom, and when I came back, my phone had been tossed carelessly to another chair. When I picked it up, I realized that John had called, and I had apparently disconnected the call and texted him, "Why are you calling? I'm busy." I had been so mad at Elliot, but he kept apologizing and had promised not to mess with my phone again. I had to lie to John that I had a very bad day, and he had just called at the moment when I was trying to cool off. It wasn't long after that time when one of my friends, the one who I was in contact with, called and told me she was in town, and that she had surprisingly been able to contact our two other friends. I had been so happy, and we had all made a video call reminiscing on our past, and we had agreed to have a mini get-together at a club just to catch up. We agreed on a time and date that would be convenient for us all. I even told John about it, and he agreed, saying it was good I got out of the house and saw friends. Prior to the day of the party, John had asked me a very strange question, and stupid me should have known it had been a trap, but I was clueless. He had told me a friend of his suspected his wife of cheating with a mutual friend, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions, and he had been contemplating what to do. I had snorted and abused the wife, and had told him to tell his friend to get evidence of her cheating, so he could file for divorce immediately. And John had asked me if that was what I was going to do if I were in such a situation, and I had said yes. I thought giving an answer that everyone wanted to hear would put off sense that I was also doing the exact same thing his friend's wife was doing. Because if I had said he should just trust his wife and not suspect her, he would have been surprised, and would ponder if I did the same. But I did not know that the friend in question was himself, and the friend's wife was actually me. I literally dug myself a trap hole and fell into it. The day of the mini get-together came, and I had even bought myself a killer dress and matching purse and shoes that Elliot helped me select 3 days before. I had even put on some makeup that I hardly wore because of how sweaty I could get. But I wanted to impress my friends. I wanted them to see that even as a boring school teacher, I wasn't boring, and I wanted to prove a point to myself. That evening, my friends and I met up, and we laughed, hugged, and kissed one another's cheeks to exchange pleasantries. We started off the night by ordering champagne. I guess each of us was trying to show how much we've grown from those girls on campus, who would drink beer from the bottle directly and have sex in the club's toilet. Although, soon enough, after 2 glasses of champagne, our tongues loosened, and we started chatting about our past again, laughing at some of the memories and regretting some. From my peripheral view, I saw Elliot sitting on the chair by the bar, but he positioned himself in a way that he could see me very clearly from where he sat. I was shocked and had texted him to ask what he was doing there, and he had texted back that he was there as my bodyguard, so I don't get to flirt with another younger guy and forget all about him. I ignored his texts and ignored his presence. I was there for my friends, not to bother about the insecurities of a child. So I focused on my friends and we continued recounting stories. Then we decided to play one of our many games of truth and dare. But ours was slightly different from the usual truth and dare game, as we only did the dare part, never the truth. We had begun with normal dares like taking shots or giving lap dances, and then it had graduated into something else entirely. And when it was my turn, my friends had dared me to pick a younger guy and have a one-night stand. I was already very tipsy and daring, so I had gone to Elliot where he sat, and I had smiled at him and had asked if he wanted to get out of there and have sex. Elliot was, of course, all too eager to go with the flow, and he had kissed me right in front of my friends, who had whistled and whispered, "Go, girl." We left the club and went to the nearby hotel, and while waiting for the keys to the room we paid for, Elliot smiled at me and kissed me again, while placing his hand on my bottom as if to lay his claim. By the time we were having sex, it was quite late, and I had to rush back home. John was already asleep then, so I just took a quick shower and laid beside him. But when I woke up, I couldn't find him anywhere. And now he's back with the news of wanting a divorce. And somehow, a parent had seen me going to the hotel with a younger guy, knowing I was married, and had brought the attention of the school board to it. Now they're still deciding what to do with me. But that is even the least of my problems. I cannot not have John in my life, guys. I'll be damned. Please help me. Any advice of some sort that could get my husband to forgive me and not leave me? Update on Hello, Reddit. When I came here seeking some advice of some sort to at least get my home back, I did not know, or should I say I did not think, that you guys would go as far as these. I wonder now if I had left my full name, where I stayed, and all my details here, perhaps you guys would have harassed me too physically. My mental stability right now is 0, coupled with the fact that I am so alone. I've lost everything. I mean everything that I have ever worked hard in building. But then again, I cannot claim the rights now, can I? John was the pillar of our home, and he was my strength, and now my world has collapsed because I have no John in it. Another fact is everyone hates me. Yes, both on this app and also around me. Maggie found out about my affair with her son, and let's just say she didn't exactly use very nice words to convey her feelings of hatred to me, and she will never speak to me again. My friends also found out who Elliot was to me, and all 3 of them have been keeping their very distant spaces away from me. Even my parents would not speak to me again. They want to forget they ever had me as a child because of the embarrassment I have caused them. The school I work with has finally decided that I should resign on my own so it wouldn't look like I was fired to protect my dignity and the school's dignity. What a joke. But I couldn't exactly blame them all now, could I? I caused everything with my very own foolishness. I had it all, the perfect life, my perfect husband who never complained once about my barrenness, my perfect job, and I even got a best friend who, despite all the attitude I kept putting up with all those years, never stopped loving me. But I threw it all away with my selfish acts. Now I'm all alone in this world, bearing the consequences of my own actions. I'm stuck in this stupid trap hole I built myself and fell into it. I can't find a way out. I'm so stuck, it's painful. Update. Hello, Reddit. These past few months have been hell for me. I wonder now how the real hell looks like when my life right now feels like all hells combined together. I feel so drained by my own thoughts. Every day I sit in front of a mirror and look at the emptiness I have caused my soul. I look at myself and all I see is failure, stupidity, sorrow, and pain. I don't think life is worth living anymore. I'm just passing through every day exhausted, carrying the weight of my guilt and sin. No one cares. And they shouldn't, because I brought everything upon myself. I could have done better. I could have just not had an affair. It would have been easy to help Elliot dismiss his feelings as lust. I didn't even have to do that. I could have ignored it or told John to handle him as a man. I could have just told Maggie or found a way to avoid him until he got over it. But no. I was foolish enough to want to go with the flow. I loved the attention from a younger person, and that blinded all my decisions. Now that I can see clearly, it's too late. I've lost everything. I have no one to talk to or to complain to. I have no one to love me and hold me in difficult times. I lost him, and it was over my selfish act. My heart breaks over and over again every time I remember just how much I could have avoided all of this. I threw away love that lasted for almost 15 years over something as fleeting as an affair. I could barely find tears these days. It's like my tear glands are broken or something. My eyes feel too dry even when I stay under the shower for hours hoping to drown in my own sorrow. I should have done better. I should have been a good wife to John. Now I've lost him, and all my dreams are just shattered. I have nothing, absolutely nothing left of my life. The future feels so blank and dark, and I don't even look forward to it. John will never forgive me, and that alone makes this pain even more painful. This is my last post here. I won't bother you guys with my sob story, especially since you guys are not even interested in hearing me, seeing how much you hate me, and show it through your backlashing comments. But I hope you sure are not making the same stupid mistakes I've made. I'll tell you for free, this hellhole is awful.